Hello.
Here we are again with Birth and Surrender chapter of The Girls Who Went Away by Ann Fessler.
Listen, Anne,
Gosh.
we have some talking to do with you in
Y-
our finale.
yeah.
Thank you
Yes.
for my tears weekly.
I
Right.
know. It's just so laden with
Mm-hmm.
trauma and sadness.
And this couldn't be more timely, by the way. Let's just say, like, with everything going on in the world and Gretchen
hmm
Sassoon's book that we did prior to this. I'm really glad we're doing these back to back because I just think you don't know the whole story till you know the whole story, right?
This is true.
I
Right off, it says in that first paragraph, most of the girls labored alone. The majority knew
mm,
little about what to expect physically or emotionally from childbirth. They had no idea what labor or delivery would be like and were stunned when
mm.
nurses came to prep them by shaving their pubic hair and giving them an enema, a common practice at the time. It was an incredibly frightening and lonely experience, and in some cases, cruel and dehumanizing.
I got cruel and dehumanizing through most of this with the stories from these women.
Right.
I mean, how these ladies were treated is just, I can't imagine that's how some of them went on to have other children. Because I think it would just make me so freaked out. It's
Well,
like,
yeah, not to say that they weren't. We
no, I think they're stronger than we know. It's like she gives a ton of antidotes afterwards, and it's just
hmm
like glory. Let me see my baby. Let me hold him to stop me from screaming. They let me touch his cheek. I had no idea how intensely I'd want to touch that baby. I just wasn't prepared for how desperately I wanted to hold that child and feel him and cradle him.
And
Every,
then in
uh,
many cases, parents
mm,
were like, hey, don't even look at the baby, don't hold the
yeah.
baby, don't, you'd have to have a real obviously this was a reflection of the times,
Hmm.
um, because you really have to disassociate to not want to have a grandkid or sure, I mean, if you're it's not the ideal scenario that your 16-year-old has a baby, but to
Right.
just be so disassociative
And
of
I think they
that
must have just, yeah.
that's your line, that's your family line that so
I think it must. I was thinking about this while we were reading. It's funny you said that because just learning things I am about my own situation with my birth mother. It was just the things she wrote that people were saying. I think her social worker was very kind. I mean, and she had me for several days, but I think they really believed this,
I
like the
think so
narrative.
too. I don't think
And
there's any
no, and I think
I don't
parents
think,
too,
you
they
know,
must have.
the parents knew
No, they must have, like, I think the parents
no,
must have believed this narrative
I
too, a
think
blank
so. They but
slate.
well
And
look,
yeah,
there's still people still believe
yeah,
the narrative of, these
yeah,
unfit birth mothers needing to give up their children to these savior
yeah,
adoptive parents. I mean, that really still is the common
yeah,
belief in this
yeah,
country. I don't know about other countries, but that is the common belief.
yeah. And
We fight that daily
yeah.
talking about it,
Yeah, and I don't know what happened with the parents because they are so they're almost like social workers themselves. They're so hardcore. Like you said, it's fun. It's like how did parenting shift so much? I mean, to be so crass and cold to your own children is
And I think they
mm,
probably some of them, many of them probably thought it was the best thing, you'll move on with your life. This is
yeah,
not the time for this.
yeah,
Later, you'll get married and have other kids. And so
yeah,
I just think, and then, these women talk about in this whole chapter
yeah,
that suddenly there's this baby and this immense love. And I mean,
yeah.
and there was no preparation for that. There was
No
just nothing,
counseling, no legal rights,
nothing.
and they did sometimes have legal rights that they were blatantly dissuaded from learning.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So even if they brought it up, they were told, oh, well, not just the money thing, but you're not really fit. And this child could be
Right.
going somewhere better. I mean, if they even
Well,
brought
because
it
there was
up.
one, right? There
Mm-hmm.
was one
Mm-hmm.
who's the father. came and said, "Look, I want to be with you and I want to have, let's get married." And
Yeah.
so she wrote to the social worker at the adoption
Hmm.
agency. The baby had not been placed for adoption
No.
because in those days they had like a 6 to 8 week waiting period. And the social worker completely turned her away from doing that. Like, in fact, wrote her
Yes.
uh, a letter
Cruel.
that said, I could find that. Here it is. So, despite the fact that Carol was writing because circumstances had changed, the social worker continued to affirm the quote unquote decision Carol made earlier when her situation was entirely different. She mentions nothing to Carol about her rights or
No.
about procedures for revoking consent. The caseworker writes, I believe that it is still the right decision for the baby, for you, as well as for your husband to be. The baby will have a wonderful, stable family who will love her and be able to give her everything emotional and financial security. You and your husband to be need time to adjust to each other, build a stable relationship,
Yes.
and then start building your family.
Like, who
First, can
is
I just
she?
interject here that I really don't like the term build your family?
No, I
I
don't
don't like
either.
it.
I don't, I just all of it. She is not a lawyer. She's a social worker. Change these people's lives and that baby's life forever. Think of
Hmm.
that. Just with her, this is what I think, and I'm putting it out
Right.
there. And I
And
will
well, she was
shame you.
invested in making it
Yes.
work for.
Was there's something about six things that they, oh, here we go. There was a whole thing about the assumptions that people held because of this was interesting to me because they had a Time magazine,
Oh,
this
right. The Time Magazine
article
story.
of the adoption of Linda Joy, and it was
Ah,
all about pages and pages. And the mother was dropped off, I mean, went by herself on a bus to the maternity
right.
home. And this is what kind of sealed back then it says the circulation of, oh, it was Life magazine, excuse me, Time
Hmm.
magazine. The circulation of Life magazine at this time, and the article was published, was more than 5 million. I mean, I remember Life magazine in my home.
Oh,
So
for
everyone
yes, I
was
think we had a subscription that to it. What it
yes.
said, the scenario presented suggests that the mother made an uncomplicated
Mm,
decision that was not influenced by outside forces such as social, economic, or family pressures. It
yeah.
is presented as a matter of her deciding whether she prefers to parent or not. So, and then it says, so
Yeah, the six
convincing
things.
was the story. It was so convincing and it was so silenced were the women about how they really felt that this basic scenario is still widely accepted by the public and by many adoptees who feel
Yep.
they were unwanted by a mother who abandoned them because she had a lot of living left to do.
Right. And then it said there's six things assumed from this. And I won't read them all in detail, but first, the pregnant woman arrived alone by bus, which we
Hmm.
know wasn't always, never really the case. You're almost always taken somewhere, right? And then the simple phrase, it hurts, was all they cared about. There was, second, she reached the decision on her own, which isn't the case either,
Right.
right? Third, she acknowledges that it hurts. That's all. It hurts. That's okay. Move on. She's okay now. Fourth, the caseworker helped, but did not pressure her about her decision. So there's just these lovely helpers out there. Fifth, unlike many unwed mothers, she has a deep interest in the baby, right? That's unlike many unwed mothers. She has a deep interest in the baby. I mean, what is it's just it's a whole thing about the deep interest of the baby. Sixth, the story indicates she had an opportunity to change her mind.
I mean,
None of these are true.
no. And here we are all these years later
Saying the same
with
thing.
a ton of casualties in the wake of these.
Yeah.
Well, and it ends with talking about in many states, the two time spans most critical to surrendering mothers have been drastically shortened. So back then it
Hmm.
was 4 to 6 weeks. The first is the duration between birth and signing consent, and the second is the period of time after signing during which the mother may revoke her consent. In 19 states, a mother can sign a consent to relinquish the rights to her child within 24 hours of birth. And in 6 of those states, the consent is irrevocable.
Mm,
Irrevocable. Um, well, this of course was written a
Yeah,
few years, well, not that
yeah.
long ago.
No, I was gonna say, I wonder if, the shifting, I don't think it's shifted all that much, but just, yeah. Next, we read Margaret
Margaret and I believe, and Leslie.
and Leslie. So for those of you reading along, I mean, what's interesting is we've been doing this for 3 years. I'm still learning a ton,
I
right?
know. I
Almost
know.
4 years. Yeah. It's like, but I still feel like,
3.5 years, I think,
yeah, I'm
is where
still
we're at.
learning and learning. And
Mm-hmm.
this is why reading is so important and getting these things out there.
Getting these stories and discussions and just bringing awareness. It's not
Yeah.
so sunny as everybody thinks it is, you know?
No.
So, well, now we have Leah to talk
Oh,
to.
yep. We'll
Maybe
see you in a minute.
see you in a minute.